Sales Docket. Steve Rapp and Tim Garner presenting an incredible person that's been in the space for a few years, Kris Taylor. Kris is at Purpose, just an incredible resource of knowledge. I've known Kris for many years, highly respected in the space. And as usual, we will let Mr. Taylor come in and talk a little bit about your journey into the space, how you got started, and then we'll dive into, because there's a couple of things that in my career that have always stood out. Talking to you, it's just always an insightful conversation. So I think the sales gems we're going to pull out of this one is going to be great. Once again, Steve Rapp, Tim Garner, and Kris Taylor. Away we go.
Thanks for having me. I think to start off, kind of how I got started in this space is a long story. I'll try to scale it back a little bit, but at a young age, I was working in the restaurant industry, and I excelled very quickly. Moved up in management, was running restaurants as a GM at 18, 19 years old. Won a number of awards in the space. And it's a very similar industry in many ways when it comes to I learned a lot in that space: service, food costs, managing people, communication skills, dealing with clients or customers. And it was a real, that's really where I kind of got started in the restaurant space, because it is somewhat sales. But it was a lot of long hours, opening up restaurants from scratch, etc. And my brother Kim had started a company called Lexaludio, and was mainly doing document imaging and coding and trial support services. And he called me up one day. I was going to move over I kind of got tired of the long hours, and I was going to move to Cisco Foods. Called me up the day before I was supposed to start and asked me to come over and work for him at Lexaludio. And I didn't know anything about computers. And at the time I had some, a small child and, bills to pay. And he's like, by the way, it's going to be, considerably less money than what you're going to make at Cisco. And I thought about it, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And so I joined Lexaludio on the operations side. Quickly after about a year working on the operations side, I'm like, this isn't for me. I'm a type A hyper person. I can't sit behind scanners and doing video MPEGing and syncing and things like that. And I convinced my brother to let me go into sales. And within a few months, we were only selling out in Phoenix. And I said, you know what, I'm going to try other markets. And before you knew it, I was bringing in huge cases and boxes of documents to be scanned from other cities across the United States. And so I really kind of helped change the company's mentality from a local Phoenix service provider to, more of a, even a global provider at some point. So that's kind of how I got started into the space, from the restaurant business into the legal world. And then of course, things changed over time. We started doing e-discovery and writing software and review platforms, and throughout the whole process over the last 26 years or however long it's been, technology changes, and I've stayed up on top of all this. But I'll stop there. That's kind of my story.
And just what's your role right now?
Right now I'm the president. Right now I'm president of Purpose Legal. I oversee pretty much most of Purpose Legal and what we're doing, but a heavy focus on our advisory group, our sales team, our marketing team, but working very, very closely with the operations team and bringing in new technologies. I am very technical for someone with a heavy sales background.
Which is a great transition. So Tim doesn't know you as well as I do, so I might be doing more. Tim's got a bunch of questions he's going to ask, but Kris, the thing that I remember, and this was early days, I think when I first met you, it was probably when I was at Clearwell. And one of the things that always stuck with me, which was really interesting, was a conversation. I don't know if you remember this, but it was a conversation we were having on successful salespeople. and your methodology back then of cultivating a person through project management, right? So they really understood the technical aspects of the work before they were ever allowed to sell, which I think was a really unique approach. And I've discussed this a couple of times on some of the podcasts. Is big change for me was when I really jumped over that technical barrier and started giving my own demos and understood the technology better. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, is that something that, I mean, that was an incredible philosophy. It sounds like it was also your track also as a salesperson, like you got deep into the technical side of the things. Can you talk more about that? Like
Yeah, I
what brought
mean,
on that philosophy? What would you tell, the younger generation today as they're looking at their sales jobs?
yeah, I mean, I kind of got thrown into it right back in, early 2000s when e-discovery and even document imaging and coding and OCR and those things back then, we didn't really have project managers.
Hmm.
At least at Lex Ludio. Maybe other companies did, but we didn't. And so as my business grew, I really wanted to make sure I understood all aspects of what we were doing, how the sausage is made, being involved heavily throughout every step of the process. And so I really learned early on that, being engaged, understanding the process, understanding the technology allowed me to become a better sales professional, or what I call consultant. I believe sales professionals should be consultants and project managers, first. And so over time, I started moving some people from other departments that I felt had good people skills and good communication skills and were very detailed, and moving them underneath into my little group inside of Lex Ludio, which ultimately turned into project managers.
Right.
And then over time, some of those very talented folks, moved them into helping me with sales and managing clients. So there's different types of sales. There's people out there that are hunting. There's people out there that manage accounts. There's people out there that just open doors and allow others to come in. So there's all different types of sales professionals. So as these folks were moving into helping with sales, we kind of understood what they were really good at and put them in the right roles, right?
Mm.
There's counts where you need, it's already an account, it's going well, and you just need someone to manage it. And we still consider them a sales professional. They're trying to grow land and expand.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we're being proactive and not get complacent. And then you have those folks that are just really good out there at networking, finding leads, bringing them in. And some of them could be both, right? I've never really been a hunter. Most of my business has come through referrals. I did do a little bit of hunting back in the day, but a lot of my business comes in through great work and having the right processes and through referrals. But I agree with you. The best sales professionals in this industry doing the top doing at the top 5% of the sales professionals, every one of them, and I know a lot of them, every one of them have something in common. They understand our space. They understand the technology. They understand the different ways to building out models. They understand what questions to ask to potential clients to come up with solutions. They also work very well with the operations and advisory teams to make it all flow, if that makes sense.
So, I mean, it's fascinating. So if there's so you just, before the call, we just had a quick conversation, and you also mentioned that Purpose is now really looking at bringing in the next generation and training them properly. And I'll be honest, I've got next generation kids. I'm not saying anything against them, but the way the three of us grew up in this space, it was, 14, 15, 16-hour days were part of our norm. I don't think that's the way it is with the next generation. There's more of a work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see today, or what are you doing to attract, this next generation into your space, with the understanding that it's not what it used to be, right? There have to be adjustments on what these young generation are expecting from work, right? It's not, a lot of them don't want 16-hour days. They want that balance, right? So how do you do that today? I mean, what are you seeing in this next crop of salespeople, what are some of the key traits that you're seeing in them that, you know, people can drive to?
Sure. Yeah, and I definitely commend you and Tim for doing these sales dockets, and I also have been thinking heavily about this over the last couple of years as I get older, and kind of step more away from carrying a bag, and we've started a program at Purpose where we are hiring younger, talented folks that we can groom and teach and allow them to grow into a Steve Rapp or a Tim or a Kris or a John Del Piero or whoever you want to mention from
Yeah.
that's had a great career in this space. So we've started that program, and we've been actively looking for the right folks to kind of move into that um, mentorship program or whatever you want to call it. And we're really looking for certain types of folks, that have some background. We're generally not going to pull them right out of college. We want to see that they've got some track record, specifically have tech, a little bit of tech background. But really it's all about their people skills and their networking skills and their organizational skills. And so some of the folks that we've actually brought into the organizations we're putting them as PMs first to verify that they can do the things that we need them to do and teach them the right way of doing things. And then ultimately over time, and it's set before we hire them, right? This isn't, we're hiring them as a PM and then we blindside them. A lot, it's a plan in place for a short-term, long-term plan to get these talented folks, younger folks into the sales force at Purpose. And so far it's been working very well, and we've done this in the past. We just didn't realize we were doing it in the past, right? We didn't have a program. Yeah. So this is actual program. And yes, the younger folks generally want to have a work-life balance that we didn't have. And how we've been able to manage that is by building a company that can support the younger, even the older sales folks, to where they don't need to be working 16-hour days. We have advisory teams and experts and some ex-sales folks in our sales ops department, right? And that's one thing that we have built, and I did this at my previous company, built a sales ops team. And what the sales ops team does is manage clients for budgets and proposals and RFPs and scheduling calls. And then we have multiple shifts. So it takes a lot of pressure off the sales team. The sales team and sales ops work very closely together. So you have that sales support where doesn't always fall on the salesperson at 8 o'clock at night while they're at dinner to go take care of a client. They need an urgent proposal or they need a call schedule or whatever it may be.
I love that. Timmy G, you want to dive in for a sec?
No, it's interesting. So Kris, thanks for sharing time. It's funny that you've been doing this over 3 decades and we haven't met. So I appreciate you giving us a little time. But I want to go back to what you were talking about in the question that Rap asked about, you guys putting together this program, and that you might have a person, be a PM and then going to sales. It might be a hunter, might be a farmer. When you guys are going through when you're going through the interview process, are there certain characteristics that you are looking for specifically for that type of person? Like, this person's a farmer. Okay, this person's a hunter. And do you interview that way? And are there any suggestions that you can provide to younger people who may be interested in Purpose Legal that, come prepared with, this type of attitude or characteristics that would benefit them long term at Purpose?
Yeah, honestly, we do have a list of questions to ask, and you can interview someone 6 times and you may not get it right.
Right.
That it is what it is. But we do I personally I'm the last interview for any employee in our company. Sometimes I'm the first person that interviews them. Greg Mazaris, our CEO, is also interviews every candidate, no matter what department it is. And we are definitely asking folks that are coming to us that want to work in the sales side, we are digging in really closely on, or really deep into, how can they communicate? What's their overall long-term plan? And at 25 years old, 26, 27 years old, there's, not every 25 to 30-year-old has a plan. I didn't.
Right.
I just went with the flow. So we can't expect them to come to us with an outline of what their 10-year forecast is going to look like or plan. We have to kind of dig in and see who they are as a person, and how can they communicate, what's their thought process. And I'll be honest with you, work-life balance is very important to us as a company as well. But if I'm interviewing someone and they bring that up 16 times on an interview, this probably isn't the industry for them, right? And no disrespect, I love folks that want to take care of their families and spend time with them, but this is the legal industry. Let's just call it what it is. There's hours at nighttime, there's hours in the morning, there's hours in the weekend. I don't care what position you're in. It just happens. And we'll do the best we can. And and I know companies all over the service providers all over the country are trying to deal with this, and they've done a good job in changing our ways. 15 years ago, companies weren't even talking about work-life balance. I never heard it. When I had my 3 children, I was off for 1 day and I was back to work. That's not how it is. Times have changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question. No,
yeah.
It was just so that it's interesting, right? Because one of the questions we have is kind of when you look back, is there a non-sales skill like public speaking, writing, networking that was surprisingly essential to your success in legal sales? Like, I mean, clearly the restaurant was part of it, right? But I think I worked as a waiter. It was customer success. There was a lot of things going on there. But was there anything else from a non-sales skill that, if you look at your life, that truly has helped you?
Yeah, honestly, I kind of started out of the gate kind of at a disadvantage. And I'll tell you personal things here. I didn't go to college. I took a few classes around accounting and writing and things like that. As I started to do really well in this space, I needed to know how to communicate and how to write. Obviously, with AI, it's a lot easier now. And even though I've written over 50,000, a million emails, I still use it to check my emails and things like that. But I, take away some of the tangible things, like being able to write and communicate and to be able to speak in public and all that. I think in this space, and not every space is the same, right? But in the legal space, I believe you need to be able to understand, think outside the box, understand the technology, be able to be a consultant, and not just someone that's reading off of a list selling AI technology or selling hosting or selling managed review. You have to be able to think outside the box. And these days, transactional work's disappearing. We have to go in and sell to corporations and law firms for managed service deals, long-term deals, sticky business, because a lot of that transactional business is going away. And these law firms and corporations have very complex issues they're trying to resolve. You can't go in there with just looking at a document from your company saying, I want to sell these things. You have to be able to ask the right questions, dig in, come up with potential solutions on the fly, or at least be able to communicate that there are solutions and we'll get back with you. You have to be able to understand the technology, communicate, and be a consultant, in my opinion.
I love that. Yeah. It's like critical thinking. I mean, it is. It comes down to critical thinking.
It's funny you say that, because I just finished, my talented team just finished an RFP today, and it's the first time I've ever seen in a proposal, there was 3 questions, and it was all around critical thinking. And that's what they called it. I mean, I've seen proposals, some RFPs that had questions that we had to answer, which were technically critical thinking, but they actually called it critical thinking, and it was complex. And I was very impressed with this firm and the questions they asked. Anyway, that's kind of off subject, but yes.
No, listen, I have I have one of my very good friends who's a teacher in a high school, and she's come to me and she's looking for another job. I'm like, just start teaching kids how to critically think because they don't know how to do that anymore. Like that's a booming business. And she's like, it's already out there. Like I've thought of that, but that is her critique with the kids in high school today is they have no true capability to critically think. And I think that's, we didn't grow up with all this media, and we had to think on our feet. We had to dig deep into kind of what our clients' problems were and come up with solutions. And that's how you differentiated yourself. If you didn't do that, you weren't getting the business. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, the restaurant business kind of taught me that. I worked at some very extremely busy restaurants in the late 90s. And when, it's hitting the fan, you have to be able to think and figure out where do I need to be to solve these problems? What moves do I need to make on the chessboard to get this train back on the tracks? And the legal industry is no different. And I'll tell you something that drives me nuts about sales professionals is when they just want to sell something and throw it over the fence and they don't want to dig in, they don't want to learn. And you have to tell them the same thing over and over again. And everyone knows who they are. To me, that's laziness. I shouldn't have to tell you how to build out a proposal and how to come up with assumptions if you've been doing this for 15 years. It's no different than me figuring it out. You should be able to figure it out. So that tells me you're not going to be, if you have to do those things and you have to rely on other folks, other of your teammates to do that type of work, you're never going to be at the top of your game. You're just not. You could be an average salesperson, successful, but you're not going to be at the cream of the crop.
So, Timmy, you got one?
Of course I do, but you're on a roll and you just
No.
So.
Chris, I tend to do this just to let you know. I get excited and then I keep going, but I'll let Tim talk.
Along those lines that you talked about critical thinking, on our last podcast, Rap and I had a mentor of ours, and one of the things he used to tell us always was that it's okay if you come to me with a problem, but also have a solution, right? So you had to go through the whole process before you even said this was this or this was that. And 9 times out of 10, or I'd say 8 times out of 10, you figured it out for yourself and you didn't even have to ask them. But along those lines, I mean, I looked at your LinkedIn profile and, the history behind, 30 years of doing this and consulting and working with the sales team and marketing. And it seems as though you understand a lot of the aspects of the business, whether it was the paper, e-discovery, TAR, AI. What are your thoughts or views on the market and what things are happening, now? Because AI is the big buzzword, but, several years ago it was TAR and, 10 years ago was e-discovery. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts or views on the market and where you think it's going.
And I will add to that, not only your views, because we had a really good conversation at Railfest about this, but also how should a salesperson prepare for that, right? I think that's the critical piece here, because I think things are changing very, very quickly. And I'd love to hear how you think someone should prepare for it.
Yeah, I'll kind of start with Tim's initial question and kind of dive in through all of this. And if you want me to add to it, let me know. But obviously, I've been in the space for a long time, so I've seen all the things happen, right? I remember working with Mark Wentworth and Steve Rapp when Clearwell first came out, and I made a decision in one day to buy Clearwell because I saw the value of it. I didn't go ask anyone's permission to do it. I just did it. But luckily, I had the power at the time to be able to do that. But I've seen all these things transform over time, right? Even TAR. I remember looking at TAR and it was a big buzzword, and it freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, okay, am I behind? Am I off my game? I don't really understand this. And I saw so much noise, but nothing happening. So I decided, I'm gonna let this kind of settle down and wait a little bit before I really dig into it, so I don't waste my time early on when things weren't worked out. And it actually worked out for me. A lot of other people, sales professionals, were digging into it and it just wasn't ready yet. But at the end of the day, where I think the market's at right now. It's changed a lot in the last, I would say, 5 years. Um, there's less transactional work, quite a bit. I'd say it's down 80%, 75%. Law firms and corporations is calling up and saying, hey, I need data collected and processed and hosted. And it's a transactional matter. It's not an MSA or a managed service deal. That's changed. That's one thing that's changed quite a bit. Law firms and corporations are doing more and more in-house because the technology's gotten better and better. The AI, I'll get into in a little bit, but one of the other areas I think is really going to be changing over the next few years is what happens at the corporate level. There's great technology out there that's being built and already being deployed. We deploy 4IG into corporations all the time, and the data is getting indexed and called. And when AI is added into that, where I think a lot of the data from the corporation side is going to come out of there pretty much pre-called, pre-filtered, even PHI and PI detections will already be done. It's going to be a much smaller set of data coming out, or more called down version, even though data volumes keep expanding. A lot of that, I think down the road, a lot of the work that Microsoft and companies like Infinium 4IG and what they're doing is going to change at the corporate level. I also have been very heavily involved with the AI. We built an AI team about a year and a half ago, led by Jeff Johnson, who's amazing. And we've adopted all types of different AI technology. And I think some folks got it wrong out of the gate. I won't mention any names, but where I thought AI was going to be the most useful piece is at the early case assessment stage, and which are now called early case intelligence. And that's where we've had a great deal of success using some products like eDiscovery AI on the early case assessment piece. And even, Steve Rapp's product, Mark, is going that direction. I think that's where you're going to see a lot more value. Of course, we're also using other tools in conjunction: relativity, error for review, other privilege review, all different types of technology. And we're bundling them together to come up with the best solution cost-wise. The point of how salespeople need to understand this, they need to dig in, they need to see all the demos, and they need to get with folks like Jeff Johnson or folks that understand it and learn from osmosis. One of the things we do here at Purpose Legal is, we have 14, I think 15 sales professionals. I pretty much kind of mandate that they get on calls with clients that we're going to be starting from scratch, either a TAR and or AI exercise, and they sit through the whole scoping process so that they can learn. That's how you learn best, by being involved with the calls and the scoping calls and the questions that are asked and following it through the process. That's how I learned. And we've had a lot of success with the sales professionals really understanding where, that type of technology. But I do, relativity's done a lot in our industry to change how the service providers do their business, right? Server disappearing and cloud, Rel 1 coming into play, and products like Everlaw, and Disco and things like that. All of this is still kind of working itself out. But I do believe it's not all doom and gloom. We are doing more and more business through our advisory group. We're doing more direct business with corporations. We've closed a lot of large managed service deals with law firms because they still want the service provider to dig in and help them and consult with them and be a backup plan. An insurance policy, when they have people out, we can jump in, we build playbooks, we know their processes, and we keep going back to them with new technologies and new workflows. So there's a lot of value there for the law firms and corporations. And so my point is, the industry's changing. We have to adapt. And some of our competitors, they're not adapting. And if they don't adapt, they're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's really where I believe the industry is going. And we still got to let this stuff work itself out.
Sure.
Yeah, Chris, it's just so interesting that you said that, because I think in one of the sales dockets, Tim and I might have, I think we were commenting that, anytime I went to a quote unquote new organization, and I haven't had that many, thank God, but the first thing I did was go to the top salesperson, right? And I wanted to know what made them successful. I think that's changed today, because it's not only going to the top salesperson, but it's going to the Jeff Johnsons, right? The Johnsons and the AI specialist, or your data science team, right? There's now these technical teams that are focused on building out solutions that you need to kind of hitch your wagon to also. And I think that's a case in point, because I don't know if a lot of salespeople do that. I think they're just really focused on, here's my number, I got to go hit it. But take the time to go and sit in the data science. I mean, we had a reveal, there was a whole data science group. I used to go and talk to them all the time, right? I mean, that was
Yeah, it's
understanding
crazy.
what they're building, understanding the why of it, understanding how it functions is so critical for salespeople, right? Because, like you said, the more you learn on the technical aspects, the better you will be off in front of your client. I think that's a very, very true point.
I think you're dead on that. I was just talking to one of our sales professionals yesterday, had landed a big project, didn't bring in the right folks. Um, in his defense, he did move the project along, and it's a $1 million project. But then he dropped the ball when the rubber met the road during the scoping and kickoff, and didn't bring in the right team. We built an advisory team and an onboarding team for a reason. Um, as technical as I am, I have to bring the team in all the time.
Right.
Not that I couldn't answer majority of their questions, but number one, why try to answer all the questions? You want to bring in the right team to make sure that everything we're doing is working together. We're giving them the right feedback. We're building out the proposals and budgets properly. All these things intertwine. It's not the sales guy. Back in the day, I used to sell a project. I would do all the specs. I would set it up. I would do a work order, and the operations team just did the work. I didn't have advisory. I didn't have onboarding. You can't do that anymore. You really need a company that understands how to not only use these resources to land a project or a client, but then to be able to do the projects successfully, you have to have a team that's cohesive between operations, sales ops, and the sales team.
I love that. All right, I think it's close. We're getting close to 40 minutes. This has been awesome. We have one question that we kind of end this stuff with, Chris. I'm going to let Timmy G ask that, because I have been asking a lot of the questions. Tim, you want to ask that one, or?
It sounds like you're setting me up, because you're making this
No,
question
I had,
seem
well,
really big.
I had another question, and I was going to give
Go ahead.
Chris an opportunity to, I mean, we're all salespeople. We all work for our own individual companies, but, as a manager and a former sales guy, and, what is it that you would tell some of the younger viewers out here, about purpose, and how you keep the sales team motivated? And that purpose is a great opportunity for some young salesperson out there. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I have these discussions with potential sales candidates. So, and this isn't, something we wrote down and it's like a template, but at the end of the day, you want to go to a company that has built the different tools and departments to make you successful, because you cannot do it on your own. If when you're interviewing and you're deciding to take a position, you should be speaking to the head of the sales ops. You should be speaking to the head of advisory. You should be speaking to project managers. What support, and other sales professionals, what support is the company giving you? What tools are they giving you? What technology are they giving you? How flexible are they, to where that this is a team effort? And a lot of times, companies have numbers on salespeople. You look at a sales list, it's number one, top sales guy, number two, number three. That's not how it is these days. You have to have a team. So my suggestion would be is to look for companies that are building the right departments and tools and technology, and ask them, what is your future roadmap for the company? as e-discovery shifts, what am I going to be selling a year from now or a year and a half from now? How are you keeping up on it? What new service line items are you bringing to the table? Who is in charge of those decisions? What type of experience do those people have? We're lucky at this company. We've got a lot of veterans. So we sit around and get on calls and figure out what are we going to do to make sure Purpose Legal is relevant. And we meet the criteria of our sponsors, Blue Sage. What are we going to do to ensure that this company is successful down the road? And we're supporting the staff, because I'm always a big believer. We have a lot of employees, and over the years, I've worked only a few companies, but we got into some rough patches. And I remember thinking, if I don't close some big projects, we're going to lay 30, 40, 50 people off. And it sat with me, and it has for years. Sometimes we had to do it. And I don't want that to happen again. The employees are the backbone of our company. And the one last point I will make, everyone at Purpose Legal is involved in sales, whether it's a project manager, whether it's the finance department, whether it's HR, we're all involved with sales in one way or the other by taking care of our clients.
Well, that wonderful, wonderful points. It's important to understand that the interview process goes both ways. So advice to younger generation out there is that not only are you trying to get a job, but you're trying to make sure that you find the right job. So do your due diligence and interview the company that you're looking at as well, as opposed to just trying to get, a paycheck or the salary that you're looking for, because you could get that and it might not be the right place for you. So, that was
one last thing I'll add. One last thing I'll add to that, Tim, which I think is super important, because I see younger sales folks come to interview with us, and majority of the time they fail in this space or in this area. They don't prepare themselves. They don't go and read our website, read our material, go to other companies, go on the internet and look up what is e-discovery, how does it work, what other technologies surround it. There's you've got everything right there on your fingertips. Spend a few hours. I had someone come to me that I really liked, but one red flag was, we asked him, well, what's the biggest law firm and corporation in your city? Can you name any of them? And they're like, no. You're going to go sell, your clients are going to be law firms and corporations. At least go maybe look in your city, and how quick you can run a search and say, yeah, these are the top 10 law firms in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, great point. So I guess
I think when Steve was young, he didn't do any of this stuff either.
Well, I'd love to say that I did, but I didn't either, so.
I didn't either. I got thrown into it.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you. So there was a moment where I went and interviewed at Palantir. So they were building out some legal intelligence. Arif Halali introduced me to Alex Karp, the COO, and I sat there and I'm like I'm talking to a CEO of a pretty wild company. And my research, I actually called up my VP of sales from Clearwell, Trevor Eddy, and I said, I need 15 questions to ask a CEO that you would ask if you were the VP of sales, right? And so, again, it's going back to utilizing the network, knowing, at least for me, it's always been, I'm clearly not the smartest person in the room, but go find me someone who's smart enough to give me the tools to make an impression. And I sat really I had like 15, 20 questions that I promise you I would never have asked if you paid me. But when I got into that room, it put me on equal business stature. It made me sound like, it was an interesting approach, right? But Kris, you're spot on. Like, do the research, guys. And if you don't know how to do the research, ChatGPT and Gemini clearly can help you on that, because it helps me every day. So do the research. Interesting.
Well, and reach out to the three of us. I'm always happy to spend times with individuals that are trying to build their careers. I will give up 30 minutes of my time to help anyone that needs help. One last thing I want to mention, I interviewed with Knight Rider before I went to Lex Ludio, and they didn't hire me.
Wow.
So the point is, obviously, I wasn't very good at interviewing. I was very young. I didn't know anything about what I was doing outside of restaurants, but they didn't hire me. And you know what? I didn't let it bother me, because that's where my brother started, was over at Knight Rider. So I interviewed, I didn't get it. I stayed in the restaurant space, and my brother spun off Lex Ludio. But it didn't bother me. I mean, you're not going to get every position, and don't, hold your head up and figure out what you can do differently and get back at it.
I
Yeah.
love that. All right, we have one last question.
Yeah, and I think I do know the answer, but I mean, I think he's already told us. But what was your biggest transition? What was your biggest pivot to get you from, where you started at and where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about moving from the restaurant business to Lex Ludio. I talked about moving from the operations to sales. And I will say I was scared to go into sales. That's one thing we didn't talk about. Sales is a scary thing, and really it's not. It's no different than any other type of project or any other type of position.
Position, yep.
And I keep telling folks that have want to transition into sales, hey, give it a shot. If it doesn't work, go back. And you can go back into project management or advisory or whatever else you want to do. But realistically, I mean, those are the two things I could probably mention, leaving Encore, which bought Lex Ludio, and going to Epic and staying there a small window of time was a big point in my career and a change. And the other one was being able to position myself from just being a sales professional, to being a CRO, and then ultimately a president of a company with no degree, just all from hard work and proving myself and producing. And the people around, one last thing I gotta say, all the people around me over 30 years helped me get here. It's not Kris Taylor. It is all kinds of people that I've worked with over the last 30 years. Not so much Steve Rapp, maybe Mark Rentworth, but that helped me get here. It's not a one man, one woman show.
But Kris, that's a sales gem in itself. And I say that because I think the one thing about you is that your ego, you've never had an ego. And I think that's a critical sales gem, because in order to learn from others, you have to be open to learn from others. And if you have too much of an ego and you think you're the smartest in the room, that doesn't bode well. You've absorbed, you've osmosis from everybody that you can to learn and to get to where you are. And I think that's a very critical thing about you, buddy, is that with all your success and the hundreds of millions of dollars that you sold in this space over your years, you just don't have an ego. And I think that's
I don't think you met me in my 30s. I think I had some egos in my low 30s.
Right.
Honestly, it wasn't so much as egos. One of the mistakes I've made in my career when I was younger, and I probably still do a little bit, when I'm talking to someone that didn't add any value to me because I was so busy, whether I'm at Legal Week or talking to someone and there's no value there, I was so busy, I would just kind of shun them, and I got busy, more important things to do. And I burned some bridges by not just spending a few minutes and being patient, instead focusing on the job I need to get done and kind of poo-pooing them. That's one mistake I made as I became successful. A little bit too aggressive and too focused on the work that needs to be done and the laundry list of things I need to do, instead of looking at people as humans and wanting to spend time with them and being a little bit more patient. That's one area I made mistake as I became very successful. I've since course corrected that as best I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
thank God I didn't meet you in your 30s.
Well, no, and you know what, Kris? I mean, we can pretty much wrap things up, but I did want to point out that one of the things that you said that kind of stuck with me, and I think any of our viewers should listen to, is that when you didn't get hired by Knight Rider, you didn't give up. You didn't take it any kind of way. You was just like on to the next thing. All of us here have failed. tremendously, because that's put us in a situation to become successful. So, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's a personal situation that you don't have to share, right? A lot of people want to just tell their wins, and this is not the casino where you only talk about your wins. Sharing this information is vital to our audience, and making sure that they understand you're going to get knocked down. Get up and keep it moving. So
Yeah,
thanks for sharing.
I think you all three would agree with me. We make mistakes every day. Even after 30 years of me doing this, I literally make mistakes every day.
Well, look, I'm doing a podcast with Rat. I don't know how that's going to work out.
And then on top of that, I agreed to get on with Rat.
Exactly.
So that's like a massive mistake.
Look, we've already made mistakes, so, but no, this has been great, Kris. This has been great.
Yeah, Tim, I haven't met you before. It's been a pleasure. And all kidding aside, Steve's one of the best in the industry and a good friend. And I'm happy to join. Hopefully some people get some value out of this.
No, without a doubt. Now, Kris, you do get to mention a couple of names you think we should have as future guests. Is there any, like, from a sales perspective, that would add some really nice gems? And you've seen a lot of salespeople in your space. Your brother's been begging me, so I gotta have him on one of these days. That's for sure.
Oh, don't do that. He wouldn't know sales. He wouldn't know sales if it hit him in the face. I think there's a few people off the top of my head. John Del Piero, I think, is one of the most talented sales professionals in the space. Very similar to me, a little different path. He's over at Lighthouse. He's amazing. I also think the world of Adam Rubinger.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got him slated.
We had him on.
Oh, you did? Okay. Mike Sarlo, could be a strange cookie. I love him to death. Definitely different than me and Adam, but it's very successful. There's probably a ton more.
You can text us afterwards.
Yeah, I could text you after. There's a whole bunch of them, but those are three that I really like.
Yeah, perfect. Well, buddy, really, really appreciate your time. We thank you so much.
You need to add Gabe Landau from Lighthouse too, because of his transition, his whole story of how he transitioned into sales and how he's become successful in sales is amazing. Like his whole background, you're just gonna freak out when you really understand his background from Hollywood to here. That's someone I would listen to, and he's very successful now.
Okay, I love that. All right, buddy, appreciate you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Take care.